first video, what we're going to talk about is how to get something like this. So similar to what we did in the last few projects, just drawing some text that's clonable and stampable. And then what we'll do in the next video is we'll get to this point by adding a loop in here. All we need to do is a one directional loop, not a two directional loop this time, because we're just going in one direction. So again, we've got this downloads folder if you need this. If you want to try and do this yourself, very welcome to go ahead and speed ahead of me. But what we're going to do, we'll do this piece by piece, just like we always do. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a brand new project, and we're going to set this up as always as out of Office. And just like before, we don't need any HTML content in here. We're going to get rid of this because this is all drawn in P5. Again, we have some style. We have our base.css, which is our general reset. And then we have our own style.css. We don't need our H1 in here, so we'll get rid of that. We don't need a width and we don't need a margin. We do want to have a background color and text color. This one is just pure black, so I can do #000000, similar to the name of the project, out of Office. We're using lots of zeros. And the text color is going to be white, so we'll pick that one as well. So the first thing we need to do is install P5 into our project. So again, I've got my downloads project here. I've got my content, which has some links in here, and I've got my assets. Now there's 3 files in here. There's the Space Grotesque, there's P5, and there's also an easing.js, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But first thing we're going to do is we'll add all 3. So I'm going to take all 3 from assets and add them to my project. So we're only going to use 2 for now. We're going to use P5 and we're going to use our own code. Now we'll talk about easing again a little bit later. We're not going to add it just yet. So in index.html, we want to add, first of all, P5. We're going to draw things to the page. So we're going to add a script tag. And which script do we want to do? Well, usually we'd have a choice of 1. Now we've got easing.js. We've got a choice of 2. We're going to add a source equal to, and in quotes, p5.min.js. Next, we want to write our own code, and we don't have a place to do that yet. So we're going to make a place to add our own code by adding a new script called script.js. In here, it's going to be all of our code, but first of all, we need to add it to our project, of course, because we need to run this on index.html. So next, we need to add this underneath. We need to load P5, then use it in our code. So we're going to add a script tag with a source, if I spell source correctly, of script.js. So now what we can do is in our script.js, add our own code, of course. So there's always 2 functions that we use when we use P5. They are setup and draw. This is just how P5 knows what to do with this project. So the first thing I'm going to do in here is add a function called setup and do round brackets, curly brackets. And again, I'm just going to open this up to make it a little bit easier to read. And below this, I'm going to add another function called draw, and we add round brackets, curly brackets. And again, just going to open this up to make it easier to read. Now, the first thing I'm going to do in setup is just create a canvas to make it a certain size. So I'm going to do create a canvas and what size? We're going to do 1200 by 600. So it knows a kind of like canvas artboard type size in here. Now at the moment, of course, there isn't anything on our canvas to draw. So let's just quickly add something in just to see this in action. We'll add some text in here. We'll add Rick for now, 100 and 100, just to see how this looks. Now again, you won't see this because by default, the text is in black. We've got a black background. So the first thing we're going to do is just add a fill color in here of white. So in quotes, we'll do #FFFFFF, 6 Fs. And hopefully what we'll see is the word Rick appear. There it is. Now, of course, I want my canvas in the middle of the page. At the moment, this is 100 by 100 from the top left corner. So I'm just going to add some style.css to this page. So canvas. And I'm going to move this position to be fixed. It's going to be always in the middle of the page in the top left corner. Now, this is the top left corner of the canvas. So this is currently here. It's going off the screen right now. I want to shift it back over by itself. So just to shift it back over, I'm going to use a transform and translate this whole thing 50% back its own way and back its own height. So now what we should see is this is in the right position. Of course, we haven't got the right text in here yet. We just say Rick. But what we want to do is create a graphic. So what we're going to do in our script.js is quickly get rid of some of this stuff. We don't need to say Rick, of course. And instead, what we're going to say at the top is let there be a graphic. Now we're using let graphic because we want to use this in both setup and draw. So what do we want to do with the graphic? Well, we need to create a graphic to draw inside of. So we can basically make a stamp, cut it up, paste it in lots of different ways. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a graphic. And this is going to be equal to create graphics, part of P5. And this has a certain size and width too. So same as above. And now what we can start to do is add different things to this graphic itself. What do we want to add in here? So this should look familiar from previous projects. We're going to make this graphic have a fill color, which is white, same as before. We're going to add in a graphic of text size, which is going to be pretty big, 500. We're going to add in some text alignment in here, which is going to be in the center and the center, similar to what we did in the last project. And of course, we're going to add some text in here. For now, we're going to say OAS. Now, I'm using OAS because they're quite rounded characters. It makes it a little bit easier to see what is going on. And where do I want to place them? Well, if I place them in the middle of my graphic, so this is half of this width, and maybe half of this height as well. Now, currently this graphic is saved. It's not drawn to the canvas. So at the moment, we won't see it. What we want to do is draw this every single time. So in my draw function, I'm going to make a new image and I'm going to call this graphic. Where do we want to draw from and to? Well, we want to draw to 0, 0. How wide is this original, this destination? It's going to be 1200 by 600. And what is the original source? So which part of this graphic do we want to copy? Well, we want to copy exactly the same thing, 0, 0. And then 1200, 600. So if we see this now, we should see OS, or OS, whatever we want to call it. Obviously, it's not the right text. We're going to kind of work on that a little bit later. But the next thing we want to do is just quickly add in this typography. We've got the space grotesque again. We're going to use this in the same way. So right at the top here, we're going to say let font. And underneath here, we need to preload this. So we need to preload it to send it to setup to then draw. So we're going to add a function called preload, and in round brackets, curly brackets. What we're going to do is make this font from up here be equal to a loaded font. So load and capital F in font. Which font do we want to run this on? We want to run this on space grotesque dash medium.otf, the name of the file in here. Now, of course, we're not using this font yet. At the moment, it's still Arial. So what we're going to do, last of all, is just add this graphic. .text font is going to be this font. So we can put this in kind of any order, just this text needs to be the last thing. And now what we have is something that looks like this. Now again, this might feel a little bit low because these are lowercase characters. So I might want to just shift this up a tiny bit up on the page. So maybe it's not at 300, maybe it's at something like 260. I'm going to move it slightly up the page a little bit more so it feels a little bit more aligned in the middle, so I can have this control over this page. Now, of course, this is what we've got at this side of the page. What we want to start to work on is this side of the page, which we'll do in the next video.